Welcome to the Pub Sports Radio, Ian Cameron Sports Report for Friday, October 16th. It's the last show of the week. Again, this show will run Monday to Friday, weekdays here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. I will not be doing the show on weekends, Saturday and Sunday. But as I mentioned earlier in the week, I'm not leaving you guys hanging just because this is the last show of the week. When it comes to the football weekend that's coming up, no, we're going to have a big NFL and college football weekend preview coming up on today's show. It's what I like to call the Ian Cameron Sports Report Friday Football Six-Pack. And if anybody knows me well, they know that I love a good six-pack every now and then. We've got it today on the show. Six-pack, we're going to have 6 games. I'm going to break down 3 Saturday college football games from a betting perspective, as well as 3 Sunday NFL games from a betting perspective. So looking forward to that. Let's, before we get into the weekend, and also I'll briefly preview the 2 Friday night MLB games taking place tonight, ALCS, NLCS. Before we get to that, we'll look back on last night, and let's start in college football, where it was just no defense whatsoever. And the running joke from some people on Twitter, and it's pretty clever, Arkansas State and Georgia State defensively were already practicing physical distancing in that football game last night between the Red Wolves and Panthers. Look, I know these aren't 2 great defenses, especially Arkansas State, even though they did find a way to get the stop when they needed it and pull out the victory over Georgia State, 59-52, 111 points scored in that game last night between those 2 teams. I know they're 2 bad defenses, but it was just borderline embarrassing and pathetic at times last night to see just the ineptitude of both teams in terms of their ability to stop the other. You were getting breakdowns in the secondary, nobody able to get a pass rush whatsoever on the opposing quarterback. I mean, it was just every single lack of fundamental football on the defensive side that you could think of. We saw it from both of those teams last night. The game obviously flies over the total, and Arkansas State, to win games this year, we're seeing it with them. They've got to be able to score a bunch of points because you can't trust their defense. Thankfully for the Red Wolves, Lane Hatcher and Logan Bonner, the 2 quarterbacks, did enough offensively to outscore Georgia State in a high-scoring shootout last night in that Sun Belt matchup. So Arkansas State, that doesn't matter when you bet them, whether you got 4.5 when the line first opened, or whether you got 3.5 later in the week with the money coming in on Georgia State. All of that money wrong, as Arkansas State gets the money, gets the win and the point spread cover, and the game obviously flies over the total. You're not splitting the atom figuring that one out. The baseball last night, ALCS and NLCS games. How about the gritty, gutsy Houston Astros? They are just will not go away in that series against the Rays. They did it again yesterday. And we got to give their bullpen a lot of credit. A lot of people saying that if the game was close late, the Astros bullpen was not going to be able to match the Ray bullpen pitch for pitch. But you've got to give them credit. They did that last night, gave their offense a chance in the bottom of the 9th inning to maybe walk off that game with a victory. And sure enough, Carlos Correa does just that with the solo home run to put the Astros ahead 4-3 and give them the win in Game 5. Game 5, and now all of a sudden we head to Game 6 with this series 3-2 between the Rays and Astros. Houston, obviously, another underdog winner on the money line for them, and for the 5th straight game in the series, the game stays under the total between Tampa Bay and Houston last night. Thanks to the Atlanta Braves and a 6th inning onslaught in the NLCS game last night, that game soared over the total, which I was happy about. It salvaged a split for me with the 2 totals. I liked the over in both games yesterday. Obviously, it didn't quite get there with Houston-Tampa, but it sure did with the Dodgers and Braves. Thanks to an onslaught by the Atlanta Braves, and the Dodgers, after that outburst of 15 runs in Game 3 of this series, all of a sudden, back to the same old Dodgers yesterday. Couldn't get a clutch hit. When the game was close, nobody was getting that big key hit or having that really good at bat. And sure enough, Atlanta exploded against Clayton Kershaw. And I know there's a lot of people and Dodgers fans once again going overboard with criticism toward Clayton Kershaw. And I understand this guy's underachieved and underperformed in the postseason, but if you're going to lay all of the blame for last night on Clayton Kershaw, you clearly weren't watching the same baseball game that I was. I was seeing feeble at-bats from the Dodgers. I saw a couple errors in the field. Lack of run support. What's he supposed to do? That game was 1-1 going into the sixth inning. Obviously, the sixth inning wasn't great for Clayton Kershaw, but and you'd like to see him, find a way to put up that last zero. He was so close to having a great start for the LA Dodgers, and instead it was just an okay start when it was all said and done. But yeah, he didn't have the sixth inning he wanted, but there's other reasons too. The Dodgers are now down 3-1 in this NLCS series. Other than the outburst in Game 4, and when they were already down 7-0 in the previous game. Other than that, it's been a situation where the LA Dodgers have struggled to have these good at-bats up and down their lineup, and it continued again last night. They had opportunities. Again, top of the seventh, there was 7-2 Atlanta at the time. They loaded the bases. All it takes is one big hit into the gap. Maybe you clear the bases and it gets to 7-5 and you put more pressure back on Atlanta in that game last night. They didn't come up with that big hit once again. And that was the issue again for the Dodgers last night. So, yeah, Clayton Kershaw, it's disappointing. He had a tough sixth inning, but he was rolling before that. I just think it's unfair, to say all of that was his fault. There's other issues right now with the Dodgers. Their bullpen stinks too. Let's not let the bullpen off the hook. This Dodgers bullpen hasn't pitched good in this series, in my opinion. And you maybe thought you gave their bullpen an edge over Atlanta's, which had a rough regular season, but lo and behold, Atlanta's bullpen's been pretty rock steady here in the playoffs for Atlanta. So now the Dodgers facing must-win tonight in Game 5 of this series. Elimination game for them as they will try to stay alive against Atlanta. Let's go right into previewing the two baseball games tonight. We'll start with Houston-Tampa Bay. We've got Framber Valdez, Blake Snell on the mound, a battle of lefties tonight. Tampa Bay -130, -135 favorite, total 8 in this game, shaded to the under. I do have a quarter unit on the over here. I know I'm a stubborn son of a gun sometimes, but knowing that the first 5 games of this series have gone under, you're saying, what the hell are you thinking, Ian, betting over here? But look, here's what I'm thinking. This is now going to be the 6th straight day with a game between these two teams. So it's the 6th game in 6 days. Look, I know these two teams have lacked that big crooked number inning in this series and that big scoreboard explosion in an inning to maybe push some of these games over the total. But you've got two bullpens that they simply have to be running on fumes going into this game tonight. They've pitched a lot of innings. A lot of the key relievers and high leverage relievers have pitched a lot so far in this series. I think at some point that has to show up. And at some point, the Rays are going to stop stranding base runners, and especially the Astros are going to stop stranding all of these base runners. Look at the last 2 or 3 games. I know they all stayed under the total, but all you needed in each of those games was basically one clutch hit with, guys in scoring position or with the bases loaded. And 1, 2, if not all 3 of those games could have went over the total. You've got bullpens that are lacking freshness going into this game, fatigue setting in with them. Framber Valdez and Blake Snell are certainly capable of putting up zeros and shutting the door early in the game, but they're not innings eaters. You're going to see, once again, I would think, a lot of each of these two teams' relievers and bullpen in this game tonight, and that's why I think it's got a chance to go over the total. Momentum has shifted to Houston, so I don't love laying -130, -135 here with Tampa Bay, but I would say that if you like Houston, make sure you either take Houston in the first 5 innings or split up the bet because, again, if it's a battle of bullpens, you probably have to give a greater edge to the Rays. They used Nick Anderson last night, who, of course, gave up the game-winning home run, the walk-off homer in the 9th, but some of their other relievers that are really their key relievers like Diego Castillo, Pete Fairbanks, those guys didn't pitch last night, so they're going to be they're going to be fresh, and they're going to be available for the Rays. So that's why I think if you like Houston, maybe you split that bet between the first 5 and the full game. Dodgers and Braves, Dustin May and A.J. Minter the two pitchers. Minter is a bullpen guy, so he's clearly going to be just like one of those opener deals for Brian Snitker, the manager. Probably not going to pitch deep. The current price has the Dodgers minus 190, favorites total 9. Look, it's definitely Dustin May should have the edge early. And, maybe the Dodgers to score first might be a good bet, but I don't like the Dodger pen right now. I mean, they've got issues. They don't have trust or confidence in their closer situation with Jansen. Joe Kelly's been spotty. You look at the relievers that were in last night, including Gratterall. They got hit pretty bad last night, or they got hit pretty good, I should say, last night by the Atlanta Braves. The Braves bullpen, you're going to see a lot of it tonight. And now we're going to find out how much depth this Atlanta bullpen has in it, because you're going to see a lot of them. A lot of those key relievers coming out of the bullpen tonight. It's one of those games where, look, to me, I'm not laying minus 190 with the Dodgers, but they probably will win this game. Maybe you do a Dodger team total over. Maybe you do a run line for more value. But for me, Atlanta, the way they've positioned themselves in this game with putting Minter out there, they've decided, you know what, we're up 3-1 in this series. We'll go with a bullpen day, a bullpen game. If we lose, so be it. We're still up 3-2. And then tomorrow we come back with Max Fried. And then we've got Ian Anderson, who's been really good as well in this postseason, ready for a Game 7 if it gets to that point. So I think that's kind of what the Atlanta Braves are thinking. They wanted to give Max Fried, who's become their ace here in the playoffs, another day of rest so that he is completely ready to go and pitch as long as he needs to for a potential Game 6 tomorrow. So the Braves are rolling the dice here, and they can afford to do that with a 3-1 series lead. To go with a bullpen day. They've got Max Fried waiting in the wings tomorrow if the Dodgers are able to get the victory tonight and extend this series. So I do like the over in this game as well, over 9 at about minus 110. Two lineups that are hitting right now. Dodgers obviously had chances, couldn't capitalize, but they had their opportunities, and Atlanta's offense bounced back after the Braves got drilled a couple of days ago. And again, neither bullpen has been a shutdown bullpen, especially the Dodgers. So you should have opportunities for one or both of these teams to score runs late. So doing what I did last night essentially is splitting up or going with the over in both of the games tonight and hoping for some late run scoring shenanigans, because I think all four of these teams in terms of their bullpen dealing with some fatigue, dealing with some exhausted pens right now, and hopefully it comes into play in the two games tonight. All right, let's get it going with our weekend football or Friday football six-pack, I should say. 3 games in college on Saturday, 3 games in NFL on Sunday. Let's start in college, and these are going to be some of the bigger, more marquee games that we're going to be talking about each week on this segment. We're going to start with A&M versus Mississippi State in the SEC. A&M 5-point favorites, 55.5 the total in this game. Raise your hand if you don't trust Texas A&M coming off a huge win against Florida at home last week and now laying points on the road. That would be me. I don't trust A&M in this spot. Look, Kellen Mond had one of the better games I've seen from him. Give him credit. 25 for 35 throwing the football last week against the Gators, 338 yards, 3 touchdowns. Isaiah Spiller, the running back, was outstanding as well. And Mississippi State, nobody wants to back this team now. I get that. They're coming off 2 ugly losses against Arkansas and Kentucky. They moved the football in both of those games against Arkansas. They outgained Arkansas. They outgained Kentucky. They had an 18-10 first down edge against Kentucky, 295 to 157 in total yards, but -5 turnover margin. I don't care how well you move the football in a game. That's going to get you beat every single time. And that's exactly what happened to Mississippi State last week against Kentucky. Just too many turnovers, couldn't overcome it. Mike Leach sort of ranted to this after the game last week, the second straight loss for Mississippi State. All of a sudden, the petals on that rose have wilted after the LSU win in game 1 for Mississippi State, the way things have gone for them the last 2 games. Mike Leach saying after the game, we're really going to find out now who really wants to be here at Mississippi State. It just smells like one of those spots where Mississippi State brings it here. And if they bring it here, they can give A&M trouble. I mean, A&M's defense is not a let's lay 5 on the road with defense right now. They've not been good. They were shredded by Alabama. They were absolutely carved up by Florida. They're very fortunate. Florida's defense has proven to be extremely overrated, and that they were able to outscore the Gators. A&M won that game last week, not because of their defense. It's because they were able to outscore the Gators. The A&M defense is still a problem area. I think KJ Costello and the offense and the air raids attack at home here in Starkville, they can get things going a little bit here. I like Mississippi State plus the points here. Good buy low spot on them, and probably a good sell high spot on Texas A&M, who I've seen this movie before with this Aggies team under Jimbo Fisher. You have a big win one week, and you just lay an egg and fall flat the next week. I wouldn't shock me one bit to see the same thing happen here. The total 55 and a half in this game. I lean with the over here. A&M's defense isn't stopping anybody. Mississippi State, I think this is a week that as long as they can stop shooting themselves in the foot with these turnovers, they should be able to put points on the board. And I think A&M's offense with Mond and company, Mississippi State's defense isn't going to shut them down either. So at 55, 50, in that mid-50s range, this total currently, I would look over the total in that game. Let's talk UCF and Memphis, AAC matchup here. We've got UCF 2.5-point road favorites. Some money's come in on Memphis earlier today. UCF was 3.5 road chalk, now down to 2.5. So there's some opinion here on Memphis. Total 74.5 up to 75.5 in this game. That Memphis money is not mine. I will tell you that right now. In fact, I like the other side of this game, Central Florida. Both of these teams off a bye week, and the bye week for both of these teams followed a loss for both of these teams. Memphis losing to SMU. You know, I hate the way the schedule has unfolded here for Memphis. I mean, it's impossible for this team to get on any sort of rhythm, get any sort of flow going with this program. And you've also got a new head coach, Ryan Silverfield, taking over because, of course, Mike Norvell left the head coaching role in Memphis after last season to go to Florida State. And for a new head coach trying to put his fingerprints on this program, he's been forced to just, they had the Memphis-Arkansas State game earlier, the first game of the season, and then they played again against SMU several weeks later. They had the COVID-19 outbreak within the Memphis Tigers team, which postponed a lot of their games. They finally got back to action against SMU a couple weeks ago, their second game of the season. They were awful in the first half. I think a product of that is the rust factor. They weren't sharp. They hadn't practiced very much leading up to that SMU game. They hadn't played a game since the very first week of September against Arkansas State, and it showed. Memphis was just sloppy, miscues, turnovers early in the game against SMU. They played a lot better in the second half and gave SMU a game when it was all said and done, but they spotted SMU a 3-touchdown lead. SMU was able to hang on and get the win. Good for me that happened because I was on SMU in that game. And you get a little rhythm going in that second half like Memphis did against SMU, and then you had a bye week last week. So now you got another week off. So you played a game against Arkansas State. You had a couple weeks off after that because of the COVID-19 situation, which resulted in canceled games. Then you played SMU. Now you've got another week off. This is still only the third game of the season for Memphis, and we're talking October 17. So there's been no rhythm or flow to this team in terms of their regimen and their routine going into this game. That worries me quite a bit. What also worries me is their defense still as bad as it's been in recent years. That's been the one issue with Memphis. Norvell had issues too when he was the head coach with this team on the defensive side of the football. They just weren't a good defensive team. That's carried over into this year. They're giving up almost 400 yards per game on through the air. That's trouble against this UCF offense, which is lightning fast pace and tempo. Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback, outstanding. A ton of great weapons, a good offensive line. I think Memphis is up against it trying to shut down this UCF team. I know UCF's off a loss that's actually worse than Memphis losing to SMU. UCF losing to Tulsa a couple weeks ago. That is a horrific loss for them. They were 3-touchdown favorites in that game. They lost outright to Tulsa. But if you actually look back at the history between UCF and Tulsa, you'll see that Tulsa's actually given that team fits every single year. You can't explain it. For some reason, UCF has struggled against Tulsa year in and year out. So that's why I take that loss with a grain of salt. I think there is an ability for them to bounce back here in this game. Josh Heupel saying, we took 18 penalties against Tulsa, and that's the thing that stands out. They took so many penalties. They gave Tulsa so many free yards. It really might have made the difference in the end as to why they lost that game straight up against the Golden Hurricane. Those are correctable issues. Reel in the discipline, don't have so many false start penalties or offside or really just mental mistakes. Most of those penalties were just fundamental football, false start a million times for them in that game. Things they can correct. I think they're the better of these two teams, and you can't ignore the fact UCF has dominated Memphis. They're 13-0 straight up, 7-4-2 against the spread. The last 13 head-to-head meetings between these two teams. I think at less than a field goal now with Central Florida now only laying 2.5. That's the side I would look at. And even with the high total, I think we'll see a bunch of points in this game. And when it comes to these two teams, when they meet, I don't want the under. Even at 74.5, 75, where this total is right now, it would be over or pass for me. And the last game we'll talk about on the college football part of the weekend preview is Georgia, Alabama, of course, the big game of the week, you could say, in college football. Alabama 4.5-point favorites, 57.5 the total. Again, this is not best bet material for me this game, but I have trouble laying points with a bad defense or a defense that I don't trust. And we've seen enough now from Alabama where they're having trouble getting stops right now. And it looks awfully cheap on paper. Here's Alabama, this team that has been one of the, arguably the best and most consistent program in college football for a decade now. And they're only laying 4.5 in Tuscaloosa. What's going on here? That's got to be a steal, right? Believe it or not, Alabama's got a recent losing record straight up in an ATS as a single-digit favorite. So keep that in mind. A lot of things off the field, too. I mean, we know Nick Saban diagnosed with COVID-19. He's not going to be available to coach the team for this game. So you'd think Sarkisian's going to take over those duties. Charlie Strong takes over as defensive coordinator after Saban fired his former defensive coordinator after that hideous, awful defensive game for the Alabama Crimson Tide last week against Ole Miss. Just with all of these moving parts going on with the team off the field, you just worry about how that's going to affect their performance on the field in this game. The one thing that's holding me back from really feeling strongly, even though I do lean, I lean quite a bit to Georgia plus the points here. But the one thing that's holding me back on making this a really significant bet is Stetson Bennett. Is he the quarterback that can go into Alabama and beat this team? Usually Alabama, when they are beaten, they're beaten by good offenses and great quarterbacks. You think of, Cardale Jones and the Ohio State offense in the playoffs years ago. You think of Joe Burrow for LSU and Johnny Manziel for A&M. And some of these quarterbacks over the years that have engineered upsets against Alabama. They've been great quarterbacks. I don't know yet if Stetson Bennett's a great quarterback. He's gotten better each week. There's no question. And I think he's feeling more comfortable in this offense. And Georgia does have a little bit more explosiveness in their offense compared to years past. They have a new offensive coordinator that's speeding up the tempo just ever so slightly. Last year under Kirby Smart and years before, it was just run the football, be a deliberate, methodical, run-heavy offense. Or at least letting Georgia have a little bit more diversity now and creativity and innovation with their offense. We'll see how they fare here. As far as Alabama, Mac Jones and their offense has been the strength of this team. They've looked unbelievable so far, but they've faced Ole Miss's pathetic defense, a bad Missouri defense, and a completely overrated Texas A&M defense, which has now been shredded in back-to-back games this season. This is going to be the best defense that Mac Jones and the Crimson Tide have faced this season. Let's see how they handle it. Again, if I'm betting this game, I'm looking at Georgia. And Georgia, you got to think, chomping at the bit. They've had so many opportunities to beat Alabama and been so close. This might be the most vulnerable that Alabama's been in all of these recent meetings over the years between these two programs. I'll definitely be, again, Georgia for me, betting this game. If I'm betting it, I'm looking at Georgia here, plus 4.5. And I would actually lean over. Alabama totals, even in the high 50s right now, those are scary to bet under, even with a good Georgia defense here, because they just play so fast. They have great speed. On the perimeter, Mac Jones has been outstanding at the quarterback spot. And Georgia, again, is playing with a little bit more, push the ball down the field mentality. So for me, it's a lean Georgia and a lean over 57.5 with the Saturday night showdown in the SEC between Georgia and Alabama. All right, let's go to NFL, the 3 games for the NFL card on Sunday. We're going to do Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Then we're going to do the big showdown with Rodgers and Brady, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, and then Sunday Night Football, Rams, San Francisco. So let's start with Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, 3.5-point favorites, 51 the total in this game. A lot of moving parts here, injury-wise, going into this game. Odell Beckham Jr., illness announced yesterday by Kevin Stefanski. All of a sudden, his playing status in doubt for this game. Baker Mayfield, all of a sudden questionable a little bit. There's worry that this rib injury that he suffered last week against Indianapolis, it might be more severe than people thought. So, he showed up earlier today on the injury report. That is definitely something that you worry about for Cleveland. First, is Mayfield going to for sure play? And if he does, is he going to be 100% health-wise against a Pittsburgh team that's obviously undefeated, that's played great football? And they've been very solid so far this year, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here's the one thing I worry about here with Pittsburgh, though. You start to look, and their defense coming into this season, I thought it was going to be a pretty good defense. A lot of people did. And for the most part, they have lived up to that this season, the Steeler defense. They've played well. But you start to look at the schedule and who they've played so far this season, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then you start to get more and more concerned that, is this truly a great Steeler defense this year? Or have they just feasted on a bunch of offenses and quarterbacks that we simply don't think aren't that good, like the New York Giants in week 1, like the Denver Broncos on the day that Drew Lock got injured and Jeff Driscoll had to come into the game, or the Philadelphia Eagles last week, which have had offensive issues all year. It's not like they've faced a great deal of potent offenses. Well, Cleveland's offense is rolling right now. The last 3 weeks, the Browns have not been stopped by Cincinnati, by Dallas, by Indianapolis. They shredded the Colts last week in that win. Baker Mayfield, has found chemistry with his receivers. He's getting protection. And even without Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt stepped up and able to run the ball effectively, productively for the Cleveland Browns. So this is going to be definitely one of the toughest challenges yet this season for this Pittsburgh defense. We'll see if they're up for it. On the other side, the Pittsburgh offense is getting better. And to me, each and every week, Ben Roethlisberger is getting better, stronger. As he gets more games under his belt, he's feeling more comfortable. He's got playmakers with Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool, who are suddenly developing into one hell of a 1-2 punch at wide receiver for the Steelers. That's trouble. Juju Smith-Schuster, and after what we saw from Chase Claypool with 4 touchdowns last week against the Eagles, against a Browns secondary that is susceptible. If Myles Garrett in the pass rush doesn't get to the quarterback, the Browns' pass defense is leaky, and you can make plays against them, and I think Pittsburgh can in this game. So all week long, I've been eyeing this total and interested in over the total here, 51 in this game. It's a high number. But I think Pittsburgh, for their defense, this is going to be a step up in class. To me, the best offense they've played so far. And on the flip side, Cleveland's defense, the secondary against this Steeler offense, which is getting better and better each week. Let's not forget they put up 28 against Houston. They scored 38 last week against Philadelphia. This Steeler offense is really getting better with each week. I think we'll see points. Again, I'm hoping that Odell plays for the Browns. I'm hoping that Baker Mayfield not only plays, but is healthy to play really well in this game. And if that's the case, I think we're going to have a good chance to see the Browns and the Steelers go over the total on Sunday afternoon. Green Bay, Tampa Bay. Obviously, everybody talking about Rodgers against Brady. We've got Pick'em -1 Green Bay in this game, right around a Pick'em. In some spots, it's Pick'em. In some other spots, it's Green Bay as a slight road favorite. And this is after Tampa Bay opened as a 2.5-point home favorite. So we've seen a good amount of money here on Green Bay throughout the week. Total 54.5, 55. A lot of it injury related. We know Tampa Bay was decimated on offense due to injuries last week in the Thursday night game against the Chicago Bears. And yet they still moved the ball at times. And yet they still almost won that game against Chicago. If not for some, correctable issues like bad penalties and false starts and Tom Brady wasn't happy about a bunch of them in that game last week. They could have won that game. But the fact remains, this is an injury-plagued team. Levante David on defense, questionable. Khalil Davis, ankle injury on defense, questionable. You've got Vita Vea, obviously out for the season. Jason Pierre-Paul, linebacker, questionable. But most of the injuries are on the offensive side of the football. I mean, it is just a bunch of guys that are questionable for this game. Mike Evans looks like he's going to play despite a sprained ankle, but Leonard Fournette, questionable. Chris Godwin actually has been upgraded to probable, so that's very good news for the Bucs that it looks like Chris Godwin is going to be able to play after missing the last 2 games with the right hamstring injury. Gronkowski is questionable, but I would expect him to play through that. We know O.J. Howard is on injured reserve and out indefinitely. LaShawn McCoy, questionable. Good news on the Scotty Miller front. He's had hip and groin injuries recently, but he is going to play here against the Green Bay Packers. So, again, at least a couple of bodies back on offense for Tom Brady in this game specifically. Scotty Miller going to be good to go. Chris Godwin going to be good to go at wide receiver. Mike Evans is playing. So he is actually going to have Evans and Godwin, arguably the 2 top wide receivers for this Bucs team, available on Sunday for Tom Brady and this offense. We'll see how they fare here against Green Bay. The Packers, here's the concern, though. Packers are off a bye. They're perfect on the season. They've heard everybody glowingly talk about how good they are. And I've said this over the years in NFL Handicapping 101. Off a bye week, if a team is rolling, playing great, going into the bye week, I don't love betting on that team coming out of the bye week. The momentum is disrupted. The rhythm, the flow is disrupted by the bye week. When you're in a great rhythm, you're playing every week, you're winning every week, you're playing well every week. And now all of a sudden you have this bye week. Despite starting 4-0, I worry about that for Green Bay. This could be a game where you just see them out of sorts, a little bit off kilter. I think now that Tampa Bay is actually a home underdog in this game, for me, at the current number, I can understand people betting Green Bay 2.5, 3 as an underdog. Now that they're favored, -1 in a lot of spots, at this price, I'm now interested a little bit in Tampa here in this game. I know the Packers have been Aaron Rodgers has been outstanding. He's been great. I've still got question marks about the defense for the Green Bay Packers. They played Atlanta. They played Detroit. They've played some weaker offenses, weaker quarterbacks. Let's see how they fare here against Tom Brady and the Bucs here in this game. It's still a defense I've got some questions about. The good news, though, for the Green Bay Packers is even though it looks like Alan Lazard's going to be out again, which is unfortunate for them, they are going to get their number 1 guy, the receiver that Aaron Rodgers trusts more than anybody on this team, Davante Adams. He's back and will play in this game after missing the last 2 games with a hamstring injury. That's significant. But still, at now Green Bay, the slight road favorite, I'm leaning to the Bucs now at the current +1, and I like the game over. I bet over early in the week. It was 53. I got it. I didn't even get 52, which was the opener. I bet it at 53. It's up to 54.5, 55 now in most spots, but I still think we get this game over the total. I think Green Bay's an over team. I think Tampa Bay, with Godwin and Evans on the field, they're going to pose trouble for this Packers secondary. So another game where I think we might see points in it. Now with Tampa Bay as a slight home dog in many sports books right now, they're the side I would lean with in this game at the current number. All right, Sunday Night Football, LA Rams, San Francisco 49ers. Rams 3-point road favorites, 51.5 the total. There's been a big adjustment here. I mean, on the look-ahead line last week, San Francisco was a 3-point home favorite in this game. After last week, Rams look good, beating up Washington. 49ers lose outright for the second straight week, laying more than a touchdown against Miami, and they get drilled, they get blown out and embarrassed in the process. And now all of a sudden, what was a 3.5 favorite for San Francisco in this game last week now has the LA Rams favored by a field goal on the road as of right now for this game. And yet I'm not convinced the point spread adjustment has been big enough yet on what we're seeing with this 49ers team. They have got a MASH unit taking the field for them on defense. That's how bad the injuries are for the San Francisco 49ers right now on defense. Look at all the guys out. Quan Alexander, Zeke Ansah, Nick Bosa, D Ford, they might get Quan Alexander back in this game, but Ansa's on IR. Nick Bosa's on IR. D Ford is on IR. Dante Johnson, questionable. DJ Jones is questionable. Richard Sherman is still out indefinitely. He had a setback with his injury, the veteran cornerback for this 49ers team. Ken Webster, questionable. Kayvon Williams out indefinitely. Another key corner for the 49ers. I mean, they are just littered with cluster injuries on the defensive side of the football. And they've still got a couple of their key wide receivers out when you look at it, specifically Tavon Austin and Travis Benjamin. They do have George Kittle back. Jimmy Garoppolo, who came back against Miami. It looked like he came back too soon because he was not very mobile, and he had trouble with accuracy. And whenever he was rushed in the pocket, he was making horrible decisions, bad throws, bad interceptions. He's still dealing with that lingering high ankle sprain, but he is going to play here on Sunday. I worry about that. I know he's got another week now under his belt to maybe see if that injury heals a bit, that high ankle sprain, but this is a ferocious pass rush for a guy with limited mobility to be facing this kind of pass rush that the LA Rams cannot deliver with Aaron Donald and company. That's a concern for me. And look, I know the Rams have done a lot of traveling. That is the one little concern in the back of my mind about this game. This has been a grueling schedule for the LA Rams. I mean, you look at the way things have unfolded for them so far this season. From a scheduling standpoint, it's been tough on them. They've had to fly back and forth from the East Coast to the West Coast and back again. They did the road game against Philly, came back to LA, flew back out to Buffalo, came home, played the Giants, flew back out to the East Coast to play the Washington football team last week, and now they're back home against now they're back in the West Coast in San Francisco this Sunday. So they've done a lot of travel, a lot of air miles, adding up for the LA Rams. So it's not the greatest spot in the world for them going into this game, but I cannot trust the 49ers here with all the injuries. That wasn't just losing at home to a below average team. That was getting just drilled and destroyed. And that has me worried that they can't compete to the level they need to against obviously a far superior LA Rams team when you compare them to the Miami Dolphins. Now with this number at 3, we have seen some San Francisco money the last day or two because it was 3.5 for the Rams. It's back down to 3. But now that you can lay just a flat field goal on LA, I think that's the side you got to bet here in this game. I don't like what I'm seeing out of the Niners. It would be the LA Rams laying the field goal for me over San Francisco on Sunday Night Football. And with that wraps up the first ever Friday football 6-pack here on the Ian Cameron Sports Report. We will do that every single Friday throughout the football season right here on the Ian Cameron Sports Report. That will also wrap up the show. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. A reminder, if you're interested in subscription service with me and with Ian Cameron Capping, send an email to bobano350@gmail.com. I'm entering the football weekend on a 56 and 36, 61% run in NFL college football, all of it documented on Flip Pick. It has been a great run in both sports and looking to keep that going here this weekend. So again, $75 a month for all sports. It is far more affordable and reasonable for a quality handicapping service than the majority of websites and handicappers charge. If you're interested in subscribing, send an email to bobano350@gmail.com. That'll wrap up the show, and that'll wrap up the week of shows here on Pub Sports Radio with the Ian Cameron Sports Report. This was our first week doing the show here on Pub Sports Radio, and it's great to be doing it. Thank you to everyone for tuning in and watching. I appreciate it. We will be doing this show Monday to Friday right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. Thank you to everyone for watching. Have a great weekend. Good luck with all of your wagers, and I will be back on Monday right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel with the next edition of the Ian Cameron Sports Report.